So, exactly 15 years ago today, I was on a one-way flight over to Europe, and that flight took me on one of the craziest adventures of a lifetime. I've gone on to visit more than 100 different countries, publish a best-selling book, give a TEDx talk, make thousands and thousands of crazy international experiences over the years, make tons of friends, meet my girlfriend, and just so much has happened with starting new businesses from a laptop, growing one of the world's fastest remote teams. And I just kind of want to make this video to reflect a little bit about that time. That first flight when I was moving over to Europe, when I was going over to Prague, was by far one of the saddest flights I've ever been on. And in this video, I kind of want to explain that and some of the things I've learned over the last 15 years of traveling and just give it a bit of a raw, clean look at and sort of a reflection on those past 15 years of traveling around the world. So you might understand like this is a little bit awkward. Usually I'm making more polished, clean cut videos, but in this I'm going to try to just keep it in one cut. So anyways, back to 15 years ago. What had happened was I just lost my mother to breast cancer, and this was one of the hardest things that I've ever gone through. And still to this day, it's tough to talk about. It was a big proponent of my TED Talk, and honestly, I almost started crying in the middle and on stage in front of hundreds of people. So if you want to see that, I'm not going to go too deep into what happened, but that TED Talk basically uncovers that whole segment of leading up to this point right now that I'm going to talk about. So from that moment on, I was on a one-way flight over to Europe. I had less than $5,000 in savings. I had no job lined up. All I had was a bunch of fuel and motivation to choose a journey and a life full of adventure. Losing a loved one is a catalyst that I hope nobody has to go through, but unfortunately, it's a sad reality that we're all going to have to face. And looking back, it was the catalyst that chose the different perspective for how I wanted to live my life. I wanted to have a life full of living every day and every year on my own terms. Of course, in the beginning, it's a lot harder to do. And it wasn't full just day one, everything's going to be on my own terms. I'm going to be my own boss. No, it took 5, 10 years of working for others, learning, trying to slowly develop and shape the life into what it is now, where I can wake up when I want. I'm in an amazing villa here in Thailand, but I kind of wanted to show that 15-year journey of what that looked like and just give you some tidbits of each section and what I've learned along the way. So looking back, year one, I was essentially leading a study abroad program in Prague. And the great thing is they'd flown me out there to take 45 students, but it was a really, really tough time. Within a month period, I'd lost the person closest in my life, had their funeral, graduated from university, had to decide which path to go in, the corporate job where I had some offers, or this unknown adventure where there was literally nothing guaranteed other than, I kind of committed to 3 months looking for a job in Europe. And then if I didn't find something, I was going to look elsewhere or try something else. So I got over to Prague, I got over to Europe, and I started essentially contacting my resources in Europe. Who do I know who lives here? Who do I know who works here? And then I had basically worked with a university in Prague for 2 years, and their study abroad program was about to close down before I was brought on. And so essentially, a long story short is I helped grow the study abroad program for 7 students to 45, which was the maximum, and essentially kind of saved this program. So both of the universities were really happy, the University of Missouri and the University in Prague. And so during this 2 years of working for them, I also was teaching at the University of Missouri. I had a finance experience. And long story short is after a few months, they had 2 years of a trial run with me and were very happy that I was interested in working for the university. So I landed a job teaching financial economics, and it was one of the coolest jobs. It really was like the best job I think any 22-year-old could ever have. So granted, I was 22 teaching 25-year-olds at a university in Prague, and I was only teaching about 4 to 5 hours per week, and then I had a few office hours. On top of that, I essentially had to create some curriculums. I also had started a brand new course through the university. And so what's been really cool is I actually just last month had given a workshop in this university about how the students can use AI to build an online business in just 4 days with under $100. So going from that to that and kind of being able to give back on all the things I've learned and help others, the students have rated me as one of the top highest workshops out there because it's such a different thing that they're learning in university. And that's kind of pushed me on this journey to just help people. And why I want to make videos like this is to, one, inspire, help educate, or just kind of like talk about the failures that I had along the way and maybe help other people learn a little bit quicker than I did. So jumping back to that first time in Prague, I didn't really have any like close friends when I moved there. I had some acquaintances, some people that coworkers and colleagues, but essentially it was a pretty lonely time to be dealing with death, somebody who was the closest to me. My mom and I spoke every single day. I was a true example of a mama's boy. And so this period in my time it was tough. Things were hard, but I think one thing looking back that kind of kept me going was all this stuff pushing me at once. It kind of let me not take it off my mind, but keep me busy enough and active so I wasn't just feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't just sitting down and saying, hey, this is a loss that's going to define my future. But no, using that loss as inspiration and using it as fuel for something that I know my mom would be so proud and excited about. So from that moment on, I basically was able to show up. About 2 to 3 months later, I was able to land this job in Prague. And it would spark that light bulb moment for me, that one moment that was, hey, you can show up in another country, you can find a job that you're going to learn a lot, improving public speaking, getting organized, interacting with students, understanding how universities work. I learned so much during this time, and I was able to have the work-life balance of being able to work and travel. When I lived in Prague, I also made a goal to visit a new country every month. And this was something, looking back, that I was really glad I took advantage of this situation of being able to have the flexibility to take those longer weekends to travel and explore Europe at my own pace. So it was one of these things where I kind of wish in US culture we had a gap year or two for people to really travel and explore. But I think the next best thing is finding work abroad, or now with remote work being so accessible, working remotely and trying it out when you're young, because the older you get, the more barriers, the more things tying you down that are going to happen. So if I were to give some advice to people who are in a similar situation about to graduate, I would say try to find something that's fully remote where you can go be based in Europe for a while, or even just try it for a few months. I think that's another thing I learned looking back was I didn't just move abroad, and just like book a one-way ticket after this. I had kind of slowly stepped into it. And the way I did this was, I'd taken a trip abroad with family for 2 weeks, really enjoyed it, was pretty, good at planning travel and finding my way and finding cool activities and stuff. Then I studied abroad. So that was a longer period where I studied abroad over the summer. And after that, I became in charge of a study abroad program. And then I started interning for a political party in Ireland for a summer. And so it just gradually started working where I realized, one, I really like this. I enjoy life abroad. And after I kept doing it, I could just envision my life more in Europe than back in the States. And the life that I actually wanted to build for myself was going to be a life abroad. And so the things that I loved about this was everything was new. Every experience that you're having is just going to be new. And the things that you're doing, like the cities you're walking around in, the restaurants you're going to, the culture, the food, the language, the history, everything you're learning about is a new experience. And one of those things where uh, moving from the US over to Europe was such a big change was everything's more walkable and accessible, and the day-to-day life just seems to be a little bit more focused on the life, living your life versus living to work. And so that was a big shift, and especially as an American, where we kind of have this hustle mentality of let's just work, grind, figure out life, make it mold to our work. Where in Europe, they kind of make it the opposite way, where life is the foundation and work kind of molds and fits around it. And some of the examples, like at the university, they have, paid maternity and paternity leave for years. So they officially have to hold and keep your job there if you have a child. Where in other parts of, the US, it's like not really going to be up to that standard. And so that's just an example. Not saying one is perfect or other, but I do think there's some sort of balance in between. And what I needed to realize was, what's the life that I want to live? And I was very intentional about this. What does my version of success look like? How am I going to achieve that? And what are some of the paths where I can keep learning, making money, and improving my career? So once that light bulb moment of getting that first job abroad happened, it would lead me to go on to work for tech startups in Australia, New Zealand. Meeting people along the way opened up a full ride scholarship for me to study my MBA in South Korea. And then on top of that, I landed a job at a tech startup where I became employee number 4 and would go on to help build and scale one of the world's biggest remote companies. And I learned so much about the online business space, building remote teams, that it really just put me on this trajectory where I am now. And it's kind of fueled that inspiration to do it for myself first, but now trying to give back and help others. So if you've made it this far, I know I'm kind of rambling, and I promise I'm going to get better at structuring these videos. But if you're enjoying this type of content, just give me a clear vote, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. What was one of the first trips that you made? Or what was one of those things that you wish you could have go on? What is that dream vacation or remote lifestyle that you want to build? Leave a comment below. So again, just kind of wrapping up here and circling back on 15 years of traveling and reflecting, I think the big sort of takeaway that I've had is other countries have a huge disparity on their work-life balance. And I think the only way you're going to have full control to actually figure out what works for you is to be your own boss. And a lot of times that sounds great, like you get to set your own hours, but likely you're going to be pushing it to past the workload element. And looking back for me to work a 4-hour week, I had to work, 60 to 80-hour weeks to be able to build and learn that structure. And just to give you an example, when I was working for, this tech startup, we were working 50, 60 hours. I worked every single weekend, like for 4 years straight. And then on top of that, I was writing my book for 2 years every single day. And again, that might not seem healthy, but I do think from every person I've talked to who's built life on their own terms and kind of done this, you sort of have to go through that sort of, unbalance to create a life that's going to be more balanced. And again, there's tons of outliers. There's lots of people who just figure it out. And again, what I suggest for people is if you've got a day job, keep it. If you don't have remote flexibility, look into transferring over to a new company that offers it. And then once you have that stability, once you're crushing your role, that's when you figure about starting side hustles, building a business on the side, and you can slowly transition into this lifestyle. But working two jobs, especially one where, you're building a business, you're going to have this imbalance of work life. But you got to understand that if the goal is to have more freedom and flexibility where you can work from anywhere, you have control over how much money you make. And if you want the flexibility to work whenever you want, that's the only path that is really feasible to achieve that, is by running and managing your own business. So if that's something that you're interested in, this is exactly how I've helped thousands of people do this. The way I've helped people and the way you can get started is there's a link below where you can get my audiobook for absolutely free. It's a best-selling audiobook and book, has over 500 positive reviews on Amazon. It's a bestseller. And if you're looking for some inspiration, make sure you check out the new videos. Check out the audiobook that's, absolutely free. And essentially just give me some feedback if you like this style of content where it's just kind of raw, unscripted, and just kind of focused on one theme. The idea here is to do this every single day for the next 30 days, focus on one sort of theme or topic, and just try to give that 15 years of knowledge in a more consistent and helpful way for you. So if you have any topics that you want me to discuss, leave a comment below as well, and I'll see you in the next one.